Okay, so everyone's been talking about the U.S. presidential elections and how
Yeah.
crazy they are,
hmm
and I think we need to dive into that today. We've
Absolutely.
got a ton of research on it,
Yeah.
and way more complicated than just like
Oh, yeah.
red versus blue.
It's so much more than that.
Yeah, it's crazy.
What really gets me is that even if we could like perfectly predict how everyone's going to vote,
Right.
you still couldn't say for sure who's going to win.
So you're saying it's not just about winning the
Yeah.
popular vote.
No, not at all. It all comes down to this thing called the Electoral College.
Oh, the Electoral College.
Yeah, imagine it's like a board game,
Right.
and winning certain states
Uh-huh.
gives you like way more points than others.
Okay.
So even if you have more points overall,
Right.
if your opponent grabs those high-value states, boom, they win.
So that's what happened in 2016, right?
Exactly.
When Hillary Clinton won the popular vote,
Yeah.
but Trump won the election
Because he got the Electoral College votes.
in those key states.
Exactly, like Michigan and Pennsylvania.
Those are called the swing states.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Those are the battlegrounds.
Right.
Neither Democrats nor Republicans have a guaranteed win there.
So they can really swing the election.
They're incredibly influential.
Gotcha. So candidates can't just focus on
No.
winning over the most people.
It's more about winning in the
Yeah.
right places.
It's like political chess.
High stakes, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, what about the primary system?
Oh, the primaries, right?
Yeah, like how does that even work?
Okay, so winning those early contests,
Yeah.
like in Iowa and New Hampshire,
Right.
it seems to matter so much.
It does, and I don't really understand why.
Well, think of it like this.
Okay.
It gives the candidate huge momentum.
Yeah.
It's a psychological boost.
Right.
It gets them more media attention, more donations, more voters.
So even if those states aren't representative of the whole country,
Oh.
it still creates this
It snowballs. Yeah,
snowball effect.
totally. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Huh. That's interesting. And then there's the polls.
Oh, the polls.
Right. They're supposed to tell us
Mhm.
what people are thinking,
Yeah.
but they're not always right.
Right. They're not foolproof.
Like there's always that margin of error,
Mm-hmm.
but sometimes it feels huge.
It can be, for sure.
Yeah.
There's just so much that can skew the results.
Like what?
Well, sometimes people aren't totally truthful.
Oh, about who they're going to vote for.
Right.
Yeah, I get that.
Maybe they're hesitant to admit it, or
Mhm.
maybe they just want to give the answer they think is like
Right, like the acceptable answer.
socially desirable. Yeah.
Exactly. And what about the likely voters?
Ooh, those are tricky.
The ones that say they'll vote but then don't.
Yeah, that's another big one.
Must be hard to predict.
It's incredibly
about
difficult.
Who's actually going to show up?
Yeah, it can really throw off the predictions.
And polls are just like,
A snapshot in time.
mhm.
And public opinion can change so quickly.
Especially now with all the media.
Oh, the media. Right?
Like it's hard to know what to believe.
It really is. I mean, with social media and the internet,
Yeah.
it's created these echo chambers.
What are echo chambers?
Basically, it's where people only see information that confirms their existing beliefs.
Oh, so it's like we're all living in our own little news feeds.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And
that
it
could
leads to so much polarization.
Right, because no one's really talking to each other.
Yeah, it's like we're all shouting from our own little islands.
And then there's all the money in media.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
Different outlets have different agendas.
And their funding impacts what they show us.
So the news itself
Yeah.
can be biased.
It's not always intentional,
Right.
but it's definitely something to be aware of.
So we have to be careful about where we get our information. So we've got this complex electoral college system, the swing states, unpredictable primaries, polls that aren't always reliable,
Mm-hmm.
and a media landscape that's
Yeah.
fragmented and potentially biased.
It's a lot to keep track of.
It sounds like a recipe for electoral chaos.
It kind of is, and we haven't even talked about
Uh,
the changing demographics of the U.S.
Oh, right. The country's becoming more diverse.
With a growing Latinx and Asian population.
And different generations vote differently, too.
It adds another layer of complexity to predicting elections.
Give me an example. Like, how do these demographic shifts actually affect an election?
Well, for example, the Latinx population is the fastest growing in the U.S.,
Wow, I didn't know that.
and their voting preferences can be really diverse depending on their age, location,
Right.
and immigration status.
Right, so it's hard to know how they'll vote.
It makes it tough for campaigns to target them.
And then you have all the generational differences.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like younger voters caring about different issues
Yeah.
than older voters.
It's constantly changing the political landscape.
So we've got the Electoral College, swing states, primaries, polls,
Mm-hmm.
media, demographics.
Yep, said everything.
Well, there's one more thing we got to talk about.
Okay, hit me with it.
October surprises.
October surprises.
Yeah, kind of ominous, right?
What
there.
are October surprises?
Basically, they're unexpected events
Okay.
that happen really close to the election.
Oh, and they can, like, totally change things.
Completely upend the race.
Like a sudden scandal.
Exactly. Or a big news story that shifts public opinion.
Right before people vote.
Precisely. And because it happens so close to the election,
Uh-huh.
candidates don't have much time to react.
Oh, so it's all about quick thinking
Yeah, and voters are making decisions based on emotion.
instead of actual policies.
A lot of times, yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. Can you give me some examples?
Oh, we've got tons.
Okay, lay it on me.
Back in 1972, right before the election.
Yeah. Nixon's advisor announced peace is at hand in Vietnam.
Wow, that must have been huge.
Oh, it was a huge deal.
Yeah,
The Vietnam War was so divisive,
right.
and people wanted it to end.
So this announcement,
Yeah.
it must have given Nixon a boost.
It likely helped him win.
Huh. So even if it wasn't totally true,
Yeah.
it still had an impact.
It's all about perception, you know?
Right. Perception is reality, especially during an election.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got a war announcement that
Mhm.
might not have been true.
Yeah. And then in 1980,
What happened then?
you had President Carter trying to free the hostages in Iran.
Oh, right, the hostage crisis.
Right. And right before the election, the negotiations fell apart.
That must have been bad for Carter.
It made him look weak,
Yeah, that makes sense.
and it likely helped Reagan win.
So these October surprises,
Hmm.
they play on people's anxieties.
They tap into deep-seated anxieties and desires.
Okay, give me another example, maybe a more recent one.
Okay, fast forward to 2008 and the Lehman Brothers collapse.
Oh, the financial crisis.
Right, it hit just weeks before the election.
I remember that. Everyone was panicking.
It totally reshaped the political landscape.
So how did that affect the election?
Well, McCain, who was running against Obama,
Yeah,
he seemed flustered by the crisis.
in Obama.
Obama projected calm and control.
So it became like a test of their leadership.
You could say that.
Wow, it's crazy how these external events
Yeah.
can change everything.
Absolutely. It's one of the things that makes elections so unpredictable.
Okay, any other October surprises that come to mind?
Let's see. In 2012,
Mm-hmm.
just days before the election,
Yeah.
Hurricane Sandy hit the East Coast.
Oh, right. That was devastating.
It was, and Obama's response to the disaster,
Yeah.
his empathy, his ability to coordinate relief efforts, it likely played a role in his reelection.
It's almost like these things are scripted.
I know, right?
And then in 2016, wasn't there something about
Oh, yeah.
Hillary Clinton's emails?
11 days before the election, the FBI announced
Yeah.
they were reopening the investigation into her emails.
That must have been a bombshell.
It was. And even though the investigation didn't find anything new,
Yeah.
the timing was terrible for Clinton.
It brought back all those doubts
Right.
about her trustworthiness.
Mhm.
So even when these surprises
Right.
don't change the facts,
Yeah.
they can still change the narrative.
Exactly. They change how people see the candidates.
Especially with social media, everything spreads so
Like
fast.
wildfire. Yeah.
Okay, so we've got the Electoral College, the swing states, the
Yeah.
primaries, polls that might not be accurate, a crazy media landscape
Right.
changing demographics, and now October surprises.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. It's like a recipe for electoral chaos.
And that's what makes U.S. presidential elections so fascinating.
But with all these factors at play, I have to ask, how much control do we actually have over the outcome?
That's a great question, and it's one we're going to dive into after
Okay.
a quick break. Stay with us.
So we just heard about all these things that make U.S. elections unpredictable.
It's a lot to process, right?
Yeah, it really makes you wonder,
Yeah,
like, if our vote even matters
I get that.
with all this chaos going on.
It's easy to feel that way.
Feels like we're just a
Mhm.
tiny boat in a huge hurricane.
That's a great analogy.
We're just getting tossed around.
But here's the thing.
Okay.
Even though it might feel insignificant, all our votes together, they make up that ocean.
Okay, so you're saying our votes still matter,
Absolutely. Every single vote contributes to the outcome.
and those outcomes affect the whole country.
They shape the direction of the country, for sure.
So even though we can't control everything,
Like those October surprises,
right, or what the media says,
we can control who we choose to represent us.
that's actually pretty empowering.
It is, and voting's just one part of it.
Oh, so there's more we can do.
We can talk about politics, support causes we care about,
Uh-huh.
hold our elected officials accountable.
Make our voices heard.
Yeah, we can donate to campaigns, volunteer our time.
Help people register to vote.
Exactly.
So it's about being an active participant,
In our democracy, yeah.
not just voting every 4 years.
It's about being involved all the time.
And that's where being informed comes in.
Yeah, that's crucial.
If we understand how things work,
Like the media.
Right. Or the Electoral College.
It helps us make better decisions.
So knowledge is power.
Even in a system that seems chaotic, knowledge helps us navigate it. It helps us cut through all the noise.
Exactly.
But there's so much information out there, it's overwhelming.
I know, it can be like drinking from a fire hose.
Where do we even start?
Well, there are resources that can help.
Oh, good.
Nonpartisan organizations,
What are those?
like factcheck.org or the League of Women Voters.
Okay.
They give unbiased info about the candidates.
So we can arm ourselves with knowledge, engage in the process. But what about those external forces, like those October surprises? Yeah, those can feel completely out of our control.
We can't stop them from happening.
That's true, but we can learn from history.
Oh, you mean like how past events have affected election?
Exactly. It helps us be more discerning.
So we can't control the chaos, but we can control how we react.
Precisely. And that's where critical thinking comes in.
Critical thinking.
We need to ask ourselves, who benefits from this information?
Yeah.
What's the source?
Is it reliable?
Exactly, especially with social media.
Oh, yeah. Social media.
Misinformation can spread so quickly.
It's crazy.
So be wary of those sensational headlines.
Yeah, and all those emotional posts.
Do your own research, cross-check information.
Don't just believe everything you see online.
That's right. Look for evidence-based reporting.
So even though U.S. elections are complex
Yeah.
and there are things we can't control,
We still have agency.
we can choose to be informed, engaged, critical voters.
Exactly, and that's what makes it a dynamic democracy.
It's constantly evolving, change.
Responding to societal shifts, technology, global events.
I'm starting to see the good side of all this.
Yeah.
It's not just about who wins or loses.
Mm-hmm.
It's about us making our voices heard.
It's an ongoing conversation.
Yeah, and working towards a better future.
Well said. And speaking of the future,
Yeah.
one thing to consider is how technology will impact elections.
Oh, right. We talked about social media, but what about AI?
Artificial intelligence, yeah.
How could that play a role?
It could be incredibly helpful, but also dangerous.
Okay, that's interesting.
On one hand, AI could analyze data,
Uh-huh.
predict voting patterns.
Like with even more accuracy.
Yeah, imagine campaigns targeting voters
Mm-hmm.
with personalized messages.
That sounds powerful, but also kind of scary.
That's a challenge. There are ethical considerations.
Like who controls the AI?
Exactly.
And how do we stop it from being used to manipulate people?
Right. It could be used to create deepfakes.
Deepfakes.
Those fake videos that look real.
Oh,
Or to spread misinformation on social media.
yeah. It's like a double-edged sword.
Exactly. It could enhance democracy or undermine it.
So it's not just the technology itself.
Mhm.
It's how we use it.
And how we regulate it, absolutely.
That's a whole other conversation.
And that brings us to another important point.
What?
Global events and their impact on elections.
We talked about the financial crisis and Hurricane Sandy.
Right. But in today's world, anything could happen.
Like what?
Well, our source material mentioned a potential October surprise
Uh-huh.
involving Israel and Iran.
Oh, like the leaked document.
Imagine if that happened close to an election.
It would be huge.
It could completely shift the focus.
Force candidates to rethink their foreign policy.
Exactly. It shows how events far away can impact us here.
It's a globalized world. Everything's connected.
That's right. We can't ignore those connections.
So it's not just about domestic issues.
It's about understanding the global context.
And how it all ties into our elections.
Which brings us back to our original question.
About how much control we have.
Yeah, we've seen so many factors.
Some we can control, some we can't.
But here's what I find fascinating.
Yeah.
Even with all the chaos and uncertainty, there's still this element of hope.
Hope. I like that.
It's not a predetermined outcome.
It's like a story we're all writing together.
Even if we don't know the ending.
That's the beauty of a dynamic democracy.
It's messy and unpredictable, but it's also powerful.
It's about us working together to shape our own destiny.
Well said. That's a perfect way to sum it up.
This whole conversation has raised a lot of questions for me.
Oh yeah, me too.
Questions about the future of our democracy, the role of technology.
And how global events will shape things.
It feels like we've just scratched the surface
And that's what we hoped for.
to spark people's curiosity.
Yeah.
Encourage them to think critically about all this,
To have these important conversations.
about the future of our democracy.
Exactly.
So what's the takeaway message for our listeners?
That's a great question. I think the best way to wrap this up is to leave them with a final question.
Ooh, a cliffhanger.
Okay, so Given all the complexities we've talked about, the challenges, the potential for disruption, the influence of global events, what changes, if any, do you think would make the U.S. electoral process better?
Wow, that's a big question.
It is, but it's an important one.
Like sending our listeners on their own deep dive.
Exactly. Maybe they'll come up with solutions we haven't thought of.
That's the power of getting people thinking and talking.
The future of our democracy depends on us.
Okay, so the U.S. presidential election, it's complex, unpredictable.
And definitely exciting.
It's never boring, that's for sure.
Nope.
We've learned about the Electoral College, swing states, unreliable polls.
Media chaos, changing demographics.
And of course, those October surprises.
Who knows what the future holds?
But the main thing I'm taking away from this is that even though it's chaotic, it's also a sign of a strong democracy.
It's a system that's always evolving and responding.
And that means there's always room for improvement.
And for us to make a difference.
So stay curious, stay informed, stay engaged.
The future of U.S. elections is in our hands.
Thanks for joining us.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep exploring and keep those thinking caps on. Yeah, that is a really big question to think about.
It makes you think about everything we've been talking about, right?
Right, like all those things that can shake things up.
The history, the technology, the global events.
It's all connected to how we vote and who gets elected.
Thinking about how to make the system stronger just makes sense.
But it's not just about making it predictable, right?
Oh, definitely not.
Like part of what's so interesting about American democracy is that it changes and adapts.
Right. It's dynamic.
It reflects what the people want.
Exactly. Stability is important.
For sure.
But so is being able to adapt.
So we don't want a system that's stuck in the past.
Exactly. It needs to be able to handle change.
And respond to new challenges.
So how do we balance those things?
Yeah, how do we make sure it's stable, but also responsive?
Fair and resilient.
That's the million-dollar question.
It really is.
And there's no easy answer.
But understanding the complexities helps.
Yeah, and all the potential problems.
And knowing how we got here.
Right, like the historical context.
All of that helps us ask the right questions.
And those questions can lead to
meaningful discussions, new solutions, maybe even some reforms.
So this deep dive wasn't just about
Yeah.
figuring out why U.S. elections are so unpredictable.
It was about more than that.
It was about empowering ourselves
Exactly.
to be more informed and engaged.
To think critically about our democracy.
Because in the end, the future of American democracy depends on us.
On every single one of us.
It depends on our willingness to learn and ask questions.
To challenge the way things are.
And work together.
To create a system that truly represents us.
That's a powerful thought.
It is. And on that note, I think we should wrap up this deep dive.
Sounds good.
It's been a fascinating journey.
We went deep into the Electoral College.
Explored swing states and those unpredictable primaries.
We talked about the media, the influence of money.
And how things happening around the world
can affect our elections here at home.
We even challenged ourselves to think about our own role in all of this.
As voters, as citizens.
As people who care about our democracy.
So to everyone listening,
stay curious, stay informed,
and stay engaged.
The future of U.S. elections is in your hands.
Every vote counts. Every voice matters.
And every effort we make to understand and improve our democracy.
It all makes a difference.
It really does.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those thinking caps on.